The desert at night does not sleep. It only changes its rules. Wind drags long fingers of sand across the empty highway. The painted lane lines are half buried and broken. On one side, a rusted border fence leans like a dead spine. On the other, nothing but dunes and the faint orange glow of a checkpoint far in the distance. A single truck crawls along the road with its headlights off, guided only by the pale strip of stars above it. In the back, under a filthy tarp, there are no vegetables, no spare parts, nothing that would appear on any official form. There are only sealed crates, invisible on any manifest, and 4 men who know they will be killed if they ever look inside. They work for the same name everyone in this borderland whispers: the Red Dune Syndicate. No one knows exactly when the syndicate began. Some say it started with 3 brothers from a poor village who realized they could earn more in one night from smuggling than in a year of honest work. Others swear it was born when a corrupt officer, tired of watching bribes pass his hands, decided to take control of the whole trade. The truth is simpler and uglier. The desert did not care who ruled it. The state drew a line across the sand and called it a border. Officials took their salaries and pretended that line was real. But the trucks, the guns, the medicine, the people hidden under tarps, they were all pulled toward the same invisible current, the places where money moved and law did not. The Red Dune Syndicate was just the first group ruthless enough to admit that. At first, they were only route men for other people's contraband. They guided convoys away from patrols, dug shallow pits to hide fuel, and paid small fortunes for the phone numbers of bored night shift guards. They memorized every dry riverbed, every broken section of fence, every hollow in the dunes where engine noise vanished. The symbol came later, a handprint of red dust smeared on the side of a crate or onto the back of a rearview mirror. If you saw that print, it meant the syndicate had blessed the route. Beneath that blessing, nothing and no one was supposed to be touched. Over time, the route men stopped working for others. They began buying the cargo themselves, a few boxes at first, then entire convoys. They did not care what they carried: stolen fuel, fake medicine, weapons, human beings pressed flat under tarps, even relics pulled from graves. If it crossed the border and someone would pay for it, the Red Dune Syndicate owned at least one corner of the deal. They did not dress like gangsters. Their leaders wore cheap suits and dusty shoes. They spoke softly, took notes, and remembered everything. One of them was known simply as the accountant. He never raised his voice, never carried a gun, and yet truck drivers who heard they had angered him would drive straight into the desert and keep going until the fuel ran out. You did not want to see the accountant's handwriting next to your name. For years, their power grew in the spaces between laws. A guard who refused their money found his superiors suddenly questioning every tiny error in his record. A local official who tried to crack down discovered that the syndicate had quietly funded his election opponent. The syndicate did not shout. It did not brag on social media. It simply closed its fist tighter around the border. But there is no empire without a rival. The first sign that something had changed was not a gunshot. It was a rumor. Drivers waiting at a desert cafe began to speak carefully about a new group that had appeared on the other side of the sand. They called themselves the Night Market. No symbol, no red dust. Just a promise: higher pay, safer routes, less tax for protection. Men who had driven for the syndicate their whole lives began to listen. Some quietly changed phone numbers. A few accepted test runs. Then a convoy marked with the red handprint vanished. The truck was found days later, half buried by a sandstorm, its crates smashed open and empty. There were no bodies, no spent shells, no tire tracks leading away. Just a message painted on the inside of the trailer wall in thin, trembling strokes. "The market opens at midnight." The accountant read those words in silence. He did not curse. He did not threaten. He simply folded the photograph of the message and put it in his pocket. From that night on, the desert became a chessboard. The Red Dune Syndicate began to test its own people. Drivers were given false routes, invented rendezvous points, fake cargo. Those who passed the test were rewarded. Those who failed were quietly replaced. Sometimes a truck was ordered down a route the syndicate already knew was watched by soldiers. If the driver returned alive, it meant he had ignored the order and called someone else for instructions. He did not return to work the next week. On the other side, the night market did the same. They whispered offers into the ears of fuel sellers and border guards: double pay, cleaner operations, no messy executions in the dunes. The fight was not only for cargo, it was for the invisible corridors of trust and fear that made the border work. The first real blood came under a moonless sky. A syndicate convoy, 3 trucks and a guide car, rolled toward a section of fence everyone believed was safe. It had been safe for years. The drivers joked on the radio, confident in the old blessings. In the last kilometer, the guide car's headlights flickered once and went out. By the time the drivers realized something was wrong, thick chains had been dragged across the road behind them and ahead of them. Shadows rose from the sand on both sides, not wearing uniforms, not shouting warnings. Only the static of the convoy's radios filled the air. No one who was there ever spoke publicly about what happened next. Some said the night market took the cargo, shot the drivers, and left their bodies as a message. Others said the drivers were offered a choice: work for the market or be buried with their crates. What everyone agrees on is this. The next morning, at a different cafe along the highway, men noticed that the red dust handprint on the wall had been wiped clean. In its place hung a blank sheet of paper. By sunset, the paper had been covered in fresh red prints. Drivers, fuel sellers, and lookouts had pressed their own hands into a bowl of dust and stamped it there. Some were protesting the attack, declaring loyalty to the syndicate. Others were simply afraid of a future without the old order. Chaos in the desert never favors the small people. The accountant saw the photograph of that wall and understood the danger. Loyalty built on fear could be bought by someone offering a new kind of fear. So he switched strategies. Until then, the Red Dune Syndicate had survived by staying in the shadows, bribing officials quietly, threatening without spectacle, cleaning up its own messes. Now, for the first time, they decided to make an example. They chose a route they knew the night market favored, a narrow riverbed, dry for most of the year, that cut under the border like a secret road. For weeks, they let market trucks pass unchallenged, carrying whatever they carried. On one particular night, nothing seemed different. A market convoy slipped into the dry riverbed just before midnight. Engines low, lights off, drivers watching for the usual police patrols and army checkpoints. Instead, they saw candles. Hundreds of small candles lined the bottom of the valley, stuck into the cracked mud like rows of tiny, flickering teeth. The drivers slowed, confused. Some thought it was a religious ritual. Others thought it was a joke. Then the floodlights snapped on. From the tops of the cliffs, pickup trucks and men with rifles appeared, silhouettes sharp against the white glare. The drivers realized, too late, that the candles were not a decoration. They were markers. Each candle stood next to a buried drum filled with fuel, connected by hidden hoses. When the accountant raised his hand, a single bullet shattered one drum. In the enclosed valley, the fire leapt from candle to candle, from drum to drum, turning the riverbed into a roaring wall of flame. In the screaming confusion, no one saw who shot whom. When it was over, the burned-out shells of the market trucks remained black against the scorched ground. The next morning, a new rumor ran across the cafes. The market has no monopoly on midnight. For a while, the syndicate's terror worked. Drivers hesitated to accept market offers. Guards who were tempted by higher bribes remembered the river of fire and stayed with the devil they already knew. The red handprint meant safety again, at least for those who kept their heads down. But power built on spectacle has a weakness. The same flames that frightened the drivers also attracted attention from far outside the desert. People who had pretended the border was under control could no longer look away. Reports were filed. Meetings were held. Units were reassigned. Satellites and drones began to draw invisible patterns over the dunes, circling the same routes the syndicate had once believed were untraceable. One by one, warehouses were raided. Quiet accountants in distant cities failed to arrive at work. A truck loaded with contraband was stopped at a checkpoint whose commander had never taken a bribe in his life, simply because someone from far away had chosen that night to watch that particular piece of road. The Red Dune Syndicate did not fall in a single dramatic battle. It dissolved like a mirage. Some members were arrested and paraded in chains. Others disappeared without a sound, their names crossed out in ledgers no one will ever see. A few, the most cautious, had already sent their families abroad and were last seen sitting in anonymous cafes, watching the news scroll past on televisions bolted to the wall. Officially, the desert border is calmer now. New checkpoints gleam under the sun. New cameras watch the fences. There are fewer stories of trucks driving with their headlights off, of drivers disappearing, of red handprints on cafe walls. Officially. On some nights, when the wind dies and the stars burn cold and sharp, people say you can still hear an engine where there should be no road. A single vehicle, not a convoy, crossing the emptiest stretch of desert. No markings, no symbols. Inside sit three people who never raise their voices, who make no threats, who pay for fuel in cash and do not haggle. Their phone numbers change every week. They tip well and leave before the coffee cools. At the next cafe down the road, someone notices a faint reddish smear on the back of a wooden chair. It might be dust from a traveler's clothes. It might be nothing at all. The owner wipes it away quickly, without looking around. After all, everyone knows the Red Dune Syndicate is gone. Everyone says the border is finally under control. And yet on certain nights, the desert still doesn't sleep.